He survived the impossible, with only the alien princess watching. Captain Elias Rain adjusted the straps of his exploration pack and took a deep breath. The air was thick and dry, carrying a faint metallic tang that made him flinch slightly. This planet was unlike anything he had ever encountered, hostile, beautiful, and utterly alien. Humanity had sent expeditions here for years, but the terrain had always been considered too dangerous for long-term study. Elias checked his equipment one more time. The communicator beeped softly, confirming that his team was still monitoring his status from the base camp several kilometers away. He was meant to collect samples of the rare vegetation in the nearby canyon, plants that might hold energy-producing properties far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. But as he scanned the horizon, a creeping feeling of unease settled over him. Something about the wind, it didn't feel ordinary. He shrugged off the feeling and began his trek. The sand crunched softly beneath his boots, and each step felt heavier than the last. Zarathia's sandstorms were infamous, capable of rising without warning and swallowing entire landscapes in minutes. Elias knew the risks, but he also knew that if he didn't push forward, humanity might lose a chance at a breakthrough that could change the way humans explored other worlds. Unseen, perched on a ridge far above the dunes, Liara, the alien princess, watched. She was tall and graceful, her slender figure almost blending into the rocky terrain. Her skin shimmered faintly in the early sunlight, and her hair, long and flowing, seemed to float as if touched by a gentle breeze. She had always been fascinated by humans. They were fragile by her species' standards, yet they carried within them an unyielding spark, a combination of determination, curiosity, and adaptability. Today, that spark would show itself in Elias' reign. Elias adjusted his helmet visor and squinted into the distance. The canyon he needed to reach was still hours away, and the wind was picking up. He tightened his grip on the walking staff he carried, a simple yet sturdy tool for navigating uneven terrain. As he climbed a small dune, he noticed a faint shimmer on the horizon. At first, he thought it was a mirage, but the shimmer persisted, growing stronger with each step. He paused, scanning the area carefully. The desert was silent, almost eerily so. No birds, no distant creatures, nothing, just the wind and the endless sea of sand. He took a cautious step forward, then another, moving carefully toward the canyon. The shimmer resolved into a pattern of light reflections from the rocks, and he realized that the canyon walls themselves seemed to be made of a crystal-like material. "This is incredible," he muttered under his breath, marveling at the natural beauty, but all quickly gave way to focus. The canyon was his destination, and every minute counted. The wind began to howl louder, and grains of sand whipped against his suit. Elias pulled his scarf tighter around his face and continued. He had learned to trust his instincts, and today those instincts told him to move fast. Suddenly, the wind shifted violently. A sandstorm was forming. He could see the dark clouds of sand swirling at a distance, moving faster than he expected. The storm was coming from the north, and if it reached him, it could trap him in the open with no shelter for hours, maybe longer. His heart beat faster, but he forced himself to stay calm. Panic would make mistakes inevitable. Elias scanned the terrain around him. There was a slight depression nearby that might offer some cover, though it wasn't much. He calculated the distance and realized he had just enough time to reach it if he ran. He set off, adjusting his pace to conserve energy while avoiding the heaviest gusts. The sandstorm was growing, and the wind tore at his suit, rattling his helmet. He pushed forward, step after step, until he reached the shallow depression. He crouched low, pressing himself against the uneven ground. The sandstorm hit with full force, and for a moment everything was swallowed in a blur of sand. Elias held his breath, closed his eyes, and focused on staying grounded. His suit's sensors gave him data about wind speed and temperature, but nothing could replace human judgment. He could feel the storm's power in his bones, yet he refused to give in to fear. Above him, Liara tilted her head, studying the human's behavior. He didn't scream, he didn't panic, and he didn't freeze. Instead, he adapted. She found herself admiring this quiet determination, the way he adjusted his body to protect himself while maintaining focus. Her people had evolved to survive far harsher environments, but they lacked something that humans had in abundance: the ability to improvise under pressure, using intelligence and observation rather than brute force. The storm raged for what felt like hours. Elias kept his breathing steady and listened to the subtle changes in wind direction. He noticed a narrow path leading out of the depression toward a small ridge that would give him a safer vantage point. Timing was crucial. One wrong step could bury him under a cascade of sand. He waited, listening to the wind's rhythm, and then when the storm's peak passed slightly, he made his move. Step by step, he inched toward the ridge, using his staff to maintain balance. Sand battered his suit, stinging his eyes and forcing him to squint. Each movement required careful calculation, but he felt alive in a way he hadn't felt on any previous mission. This was survival, not just of the body, but of the mind. Every decision mattered. Finally, he reached the ridge. From this higher ground, he could see the storm's full scale. It stretched across the horizon, a living wall of sand and wind. Elias felt a surge of relief. He had made it through the worst of it, but he knew the storm wasn't over. He needed a plan to move forward once the winds calmed. Liara, still observing from afar, tilted her head with curiosity. She had never seen a human face such raw adversity and remain so composed. It was fascinating to watch someone so fragile survive what would have been fatal for most beings. She noted each movement, each adjustment, as if learning from him. Elias crouched on the ridge, taking a moment to assess the situation. His hands were dusty and raw from gripping his staff, and his suit had small scratches from the sand's abrasive force. He allowed himself a small smile. He had survived the impossible so far, and that was no small feat. He looked toward the canyon again, calculating his next move. The storm had shifted slightly to the west, which might give him a narrow window to advance safely. He would need to move quickly but cautiously. He gathered his pack closer to his body, adjusted his gear, and began the descent toward a safer path. The canyon walls grew closer as he approached, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the muted sunlight in shimmering patterns. Elias marveled at the beauty around him even while remaining vigilant. The crystals seemed almost alive, pulsing with faint light as if reacting to the storm. He couldn't help but feel that Zarathia itself was testing him, challenging him to prove that a human could navigate its harshness without succumbing to fear. By mid-afternoon, the storm had passed enough for Elias to move freely. He used the remaining daylight to traverse the final stretch toward the canyon entrance. His movements were deliberate, cautious, and precise. Every step was a calculated choice, every decision informed by observation and experience. He wasn't just surviving, he was mastering the challenge, learning the land in real time. From her hidden perch, Liara finally allowed herself a small smile. Elia's reign was remarkable. Not just for his courage, but for the way he applied thought, patience, and adaptability to survive. Too many beings relied on strength or technology, but here was a human thriving in impossible conditions with only his wits and determination. She made a silent note to herself. This human was special, and the galaxy would notice him soon enough. By evening, Elias had reached the canyon's edge. The sun dipped low, casting long, dramatic shadows across the crystalline walls. He paused for a moment, taking in the view. The canyon was breathtaking, a maze of jagged walls and glowing mineral veins. His heart swelled with a mix of relief, awe, and quiet triumph. He had survived the impossible, and he was ready for whatever came next. As night began to settle, he set up a small, secure observation post near the canyon entrance. He checked his instruments, logged his data, and finally allowed himself to rest, confident that he had made it through the first trial. Unseen, Liara watched from the ridge, her curiosity about humans growing with each passing moment. She would not reveal herself yet, but she knew that this human's journey was far from over, and that she wanted to witness it every step of the way. Elias lay on the ground, staring at the stars emerging over Zarathia's horizon. The storm had tested him, the land had challenged him, and he had endured. For the first time on this mission, he felt a deep, unshakable sense of connection, not just to the planet, but to something greater, something that transcended human understanding. Survival was not just about living. It was about learning, adapting, and finding beauty even in the harshest conditions. And Elia's reign had done exactly that. The sun rose over the jagged walls of the canyon, casting long golden streaks across the crystalline rocks. Captain Elia's reign stirred from his makeshift camp, rubbing the dust from his eyes. The night had been cold, but he had survived it without incident. He stretched, feeling the soreness in his muscles from the day's trek, and reminded himself that the real work had only just begun. The canyon held the rare energy plants humanity had been seeking, but reaching them would be another test. Elias stood and adjusted his pack. His boots crunched against the coarse sand as he moved closer to the canyon entrance. The walls rose high on either side, their crystalline surfaces refracting light in sharp, dazzling patterns. He had to be careful. The rocks were beautiful but slippery, and a single misstep could send him tumbling into a deep crevice. He traced his path with his eyes, planning each step before moving. Unseen on a distant ridge, Liara watched. Her slender frame was almost invisible against the canyon's rocky outcrops. She had moved closer overnight, drawn by curiosity and admiration. Elias had survived a sandstorm that would have buried most beings alive, relying only on his intelligence and patience. She found it fascinating how humans used thought and observation to overcome challenges rather than raw strength. To her, it was almost an art form. Elias began his descent into the canyon, carefully testing each foothold. The crystalline walls sparkled in the early light, and he couldn't help but be mesmerized. For a moment, he forgot the dangers around him, simply enjoying the quiet beauty of the alien landscape. But then he remembered the purpose of his mission. Every minute spent marveling at the scenery was a minute lost in collecting the plants that could change humanity's understanding of energy. As he progressed, he noticed the first signs of the rare vegetation. Small, glowing leaves sprouted from the rocky ground, their veins pulsing faintly with light. Elias knelt down to inspect them, careful not to damage the delicate plants. He recorded notes, measured growth patterns, and collected a few samples in secure containers. The plants seemed fragile, almost delicate, but he could feel the energy humming within them. A sudden shift in the canyon's wind reminded him that Zarathia was unpredictable. Dust swirled in eddies along the walls, and he instinctively crouched, using his staff to steady himself. The canyon was narrow here, and a slip could send him sliding into a gap between the rocks. He inched forward cautiously, relying on both his equipment and his instincts. Liara observed silently, fascinated by the human's precision. He moved with care, adjusting his position and testing surfaces before stepping. She had watched many beings traverse dangerous terrain, but Elia's combination of observation, patience, and courage was unusual. Most species relied on speed, strength, or technology to overcome obstacles, yet here was a human succeeding with little more than thought, determination, and simple tools. Further into the canyon, Elias encountered a precarious ledge. A narrow strip of rock stretched across a small chasm, the drop on either side disappearing into darkness. He crouched, carefully calculating how to cross. He measured the distance, tested the stability of the ledge with his staff, and planned each movement. Then step by step he moved across. Each motion was deliberate, each balance point carefully chosen. Halfway across, a small rock shifted under his foot, but Elias adjusted immediately, preventing a fall. From her hidden vantage, Liara allowed herself a small sigh of relief. It was impressive how humans adapted so quickly to danger. Elias didn't panic. He observed, calculated, and acted with precision. She had never encountered a being so fragile by her species standards that could survive such hazards through thought alone. His resilience fascinated her. Once across the ledge, Elias continued deeper into the canyon. The walls began to close in, forming narrow corridors lined with crystalline veins that pulsed with soft light. The atmosphere was surreal, almost otherworldly, and Elias moved with heightened awareness. He couldn't afford to be distracted, but he couldn't deny the sense of wonder growing inside him. As he walked, he noticed a faint shimmer from the corner of his eye. At first, he thought it was a reflection from the crystal walls, but then he realized it was something more, a movement, subtle and almost imperceptible. Elias paused and focused, scanning the shadows. His instincts told him that the canyon might be home to creatures, even if he hadn't seen any yet. He moved cautiously, listening to the faint echo of his own footsteps. Liara's presence remained unseen. She had shifted slightly to remain hidden while following his progress. She did not interfere, but her awareness of his path allowed her to ensure no natural hazards blocked him unknowingly. A loose rock here, a dangling crystal there. She adjusted them subtly, guiding him without him realizing it. Hours passed as Elias carefully made his way through the twisting corridors. He stopped periodically to collect more plant samples, each time documenting the unique structure and energy readings. The plants were unlike anything on Earth. They seemed almost alive in a way he couldn't fully describe, responding to his touch with faint pulses of light. Elias marveled at them, knowing that these discoveries could revolutionize energy research for humanity. By late afternoon, Elias reached a small clearing within the canyon. A shallow pool of water reflected the soft glow of the crystalline walls, and more rare plants surrounded it. He knelt to examine them, realizing that this cluster was denser than any he had seen before. Carefully, he began to collect the samples, ensuring that he did not damage the fragile stems and leaves. A sudden shift in the terrain caught him by surprise. A small rock slide from above sent pebbles rolling toward him. Elias jumped back instinctively, then quickly assessed the situation. The slide had not blocked his path, but it reminded him that Zarathia's landscape was alive and unpredictable. He adjusted his position, moving closer to the plants and away from unstable rocks. Liara watched with quiet admiration. Elias was not only surviving but thriving in this environment. Each decision he made combined careful observation with creative problem-solving. She thought about her own people and how they might approach such a challenge, often with brute force or technological solutions. Yet here was a human navigating the canyon with minimal resources, relying entirely on intelligence, patience, and adaptability. The sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing. Elias paused to drink some water from his canteen and check his instruments. He had collected enough samples for preliminary analysis, but he knew that the most important discoveries often lay deeper within the canyon. He considered whether to continue or return to base camp before nightfall. After a brief rest, Elias decided to push forward. His curiosity outweighed his caution, and he felt confident in his ability to manage the risks. He moved carefully through the narrowing corridors, each step measured and deliberate. Occasionally, he stopped to test the stability of rocks, to inspect unusual formations, or to document more plants. As he rounded a bend, he discovered a new type of plant unlike any he had seen so far. Its leaves were translucent, with glowing veins that pulsed rhythmically. Elias knelt down to examine it, carefully brushing away sand to avoid damaging the delicate structure. He realized that this species might hold even more energy potential than the others. The ground beneath him shifted slightly, causing him to stumble. He steadied himself with his staff and breathed deeply. This was a reminder that Zarathia was unpredictable, and even careful planning could not eliminate all risks. He adjusted his approach, moving more cautiously as he continued to document the new plant species. Liara's curiosity grew. She had watched many explorers in her time, but Elia's combination of intelligence, patience, and adaptability was extraordinary. She considered revealing herself to him, but something told her it was better to observe a little longer. Humans were remarkable in their ability to solve problems independently, and she wanted to see how far this one could go. By evening, Elias found a small alcove within the canyon that offered a secure spot to rest. He set down his pack and examined his collection of plants, ensuring they were stored safely for transport back to base camp. He reflected on the day's achievements, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Not only had he navigated the canyon successfully, but he had also discovered new species that could have profound implications for humanity. He prepared a small observation post, using available materials to create a stable and secure resting place. Elias checked his instruments one last time and logged his progress. He then allowed himself to sit back and admire the canyon's beauty. The crystalline walls shimmered in the fading sunlight, and the pool reflected the glowing plants in soft, mesmerizing patterns. Liara finally moved closer, still unseen but almost fully visible to him. She was silent, observing him as he carefully tended to his equipment and samples. She found herself drawn to the human's quiet determination, the way he combined patience, creativity, and resilience in every action. Elias was extraordinary, not because he was the strongest, but because he could survive impossible challenges with intelligence and care. As night fell, Elias lay on the ground, staring at the stars emerging over Zarathia's horizon. The canyon was alive with soft sounds of wind and distant echoes, and he felt a profound connection to the planet. This was more than a mission. It was a test of human ingenuity, patience, and courage. He had faced extreme challenges and had thrived, not through power, but through observation and clever problem-solving. Liara watched silently, feeling a sense of admiration she had never experienced before. Ilia's reign was remarkable. She knew that his journey was far from over, and she was eager to witness the next stage of his adventure. For the first time, she felt that humans might truly deserve the respect that many in the galaxy had only whispered about. Ilias fell asleep under the soft glow of the crystalline canyon walls, feeling safe and confident. He had survived the day's impossible challenges, discovered new life, and proven that humans could thrive even in the most unpredictable environments. Unseen, Liara made a silent promise to continue observing him, knowing that his journey would reveal more about what made humans extraordinary. The morning light seeped through the crystalline walls of the canyon, painting the rugged surfaces in soft shades of gold and violet. Captain Ilia's reign stirred from his makeshift camp, muscles stiff from the previous day's exertion. He stretched carefully, taking in the narrow corridor that now felt both familiar and intimidating. The canyon had tested him already, but he knew that today's journey would be even more challenging. The rare energy plants he sought were rumored to thrive deeper within the labyrinth of crystalline formations, in areas difficult for even the most experienced explorers to reach. Ilias adjusted his pack, checking the containment units for the delicate plant samples he had collected the previous day. Everything was intact. He allowed himself a brief smile, knowing that careful handling had preserved the integrity of the specimens. Even the slightest damage could render them useless for study. From her hidden perch above, Liara observed. She had moved closer over the course of the day, keeping a careful distance while tracking his progress. Ilias had already survived challenges that would have claimed most lives, first the sandstorm, then the treacherous canyon. Today, he would face what she considered the true test of human adaptability. Her interest was more than curiosity, it was admiration. Humans were fragile compared to her people, yet they possessed something unique, the ability to survive the impossible through thought, patience, and careful action. Ilias began his descent into the deeper canyon. The walls narrowed and the terrain became more uneven. He had to choose his steps carefully, testing every rock and ledge before committing his weight. Small streams of water trickled from unseen cracks in the walls, making some surfaces slippery. Ilias moved cautiously, using his staff to steady himself. He paused frequently, taking measurements and noting unusual formations. Every detail might be important for understanding the plant's environment. As he rounded a bend, he encountered a chasm. It was wider than any he had crossed before, the drop into darkness seemingly endless. The canyon floor was jagged and uneven, and the walls on either side rose impossibly high. Ilias crouched, studying the gap. His mind raced, analyzing options. He could see small crystal outcroppings that might serve as stepping points, but the distance between them required careful planning. One misstep could send him sliding into the dark abyss below. Liara watched, her attention fixed on him. Humans were rarely this careful and thoughtful under pressure. Most species would have either leapt blindly or retreated, but Ilias calculated, observed, and planned. She could sense the determination in his mind, the quiet resolve that drove him forward despite the danger. He was fascinating to watch. Ilias began crossing the chasm, testing each stepping point with his staff before placing his foot. His movements were slow, deliberate, but confident. Halfway across, a small piece of crystal shifted under his weight. He froze for a moment, then adjusted his stance, using the staff for balance and moving forward carefully. Step by step, he inched toward the opposite side. The chasm was daunting, but he remained composed, relying entirely on observation and skill rather than speed or brute force. From her hidden vantage, Liara allowed herself a small smile. The human's composure was remarkable. He was fragile, certainly, but his mind was a tool far more powerful than any weapon. She admired how he faced impossible situations with intelligence, patience, and courage. Once across the chasm, Ilias pressed onward. The canyon continued to twist and narrow, forming corridors that sometimes barely allowed him to pass. The crystalline walls pulsed faintly with light, illuminating the path ahead in soft, mesmerizing patterns. Ilias paused frequently, marveling at the beauty while remaining vigilant. Every step carried risk, but he had learned to balance awe with focus. He came to a section where the walls converged, leaving only a narrow passage lined with jagged crystals. The ground here was uneven, and Ilias had to maneuver carefully to avoid slipping. He leaned on his staff, testing the stability of each step, moving slowly but steadily. His mind worked like a machine, calculating distances, predicting movements, and adapting to changes in terrain. Liara followed silently, noting his every action. The human's problem-solving abilities were extraordinary. He didn't rely on chance or instinct alone. He thought, analyzed, and executed with precision. She felt a deep admiration for him, even as she reminded herself to remain unseen. Revealing herself too soon might distract him or change the natural course of his actions. She wanted to see how far he could go on his own. Hours passed as Elias navigated the narrow corridors. He paused to examine unusual plants that grew in hidden crevices, documenting their characteristics and collecting small samples. Some glowed faintly, others pulsed with energy that he could measure only with his instruments. He realized that these plants thrived in isolation, in the most precarious parts of the canyon, protected from the harsh sunlight above. As the sun reached its peak, Elias encountered another obstacle, a series of crystal steps that rose steeply toward a higher platform. The steps were uneven and fragile, and the drop on either side was significant. He studied the formation carefully, plotting a route that would allow him to ascend safely. Each step required balance and precision, and he moved slowly, testing the crystal's stability before committing his weight. Liara's admiration grew with each movement. The human was unarmed, unprotected by natural armor, yet he navigated a perilous path that would have challenged the most seasoned explorers of her people. It was his mind, not his body, that allowed him to survive. She thought about the stories her people told of humans, fragile, clever, adaptable, and she realized that Elias embodied every positive trait she had ever heard about them. Finally, Elias reached the top of the platform. He paused to catch his breath, noting the canyon's layout from this higher vantage point. The area ahead seemed even more challenging, with steep slopes, narrow ledges, and clusters of glowing plants. Elias considered whether to continue immediately or take a moment to plan. Patience had kept him alive thus far, and he knew it would continue to do so. He chose to rest briefly, recording his observations and planning his next moves. As he did, he noticed a faint shimmer in the distance, subtle but distinct. He couldn't identify it at first, but something about the pattern of light seemed intentional, almost as if it were guiding him. Elias frowned, curious. Was it a natural reflection or something more? He decided to investigate carefully, keeping his senses alert for any changes in the terrain. Liara watched silently, her pulse quickening. She had subtly adjusted a loose crystal near his path the previous day, and now she observed as he noticed the faint shimmer. Elia's curiosity and intellect were precisely what fascinated her most. He was unafraid, yet cautious, bold, yet measured. She felt a deep appreciation for his qualities, understanding why humans were considered extraordinary by so many species. Elias approached the shimmer cautiously. As he drew closer, he realized it was not a trick of light, but the reflection of sunlight on a cluster of rare plants. Their leaves were translucent, pulsating with energy in a rhythm that almost resembled a heartbeat. He knelt, careful not to disturb them, and began examining their structure. These plants were unlike any he had seen. Their energy output could revolutionize how humanity thought about sustainable power sources. While collecting samples, Elias noticed that the ground beneath him shifted slightly. A small section of rock had loosened, creating an unstable area. He adjusted his position immediately, using his staff for balance and moving carefully to avoid disturbing the fragile terrain. His attention to detail was remarkable, each decision deliberate, each movement precise. Liara's admiration deepened. She had seen many species navigate their worlds, but none displayed the combination of patience, intelligence, and courage that Elias did. He was fragile, yet he thrived in conditions that would have defeated the strongest of her people. She knew she had to continue observing, for humans like him were rare and extraordinary. Hours passed as Elias carefully collected samples, documented observations, and navigated the increasingly complex canyon. He encountered narrow ledges, crystalline outcroppings, and small water channels, each requiring him to adapt and think creatively. Despite the challenges, he moved with confidence, guided by experience, intellect, and an unshakable resolve. As the day drew toward evening, Elias reached the canyon's final challenge, a deep gorge with sheer walls on either side. The only way across was a natural crystal bridge, narrow and uneven. He approached it with caution, studying the structure carefully. The bridge appeared stable, but its height and fragility required precision. Liara observed from a distance, completely captivated. Ilya's movements were slow and deliberate, each step calculated. He tested the surface with his staff before moving, adjusting his balance as needed. Halfway across, a crystal shifted slightly under his weight, but he adapted instantly, keeping his footing. Step by step, he reached the other side safely. Ilya's paused to admire the view. The canyon stretched endlessly, glowing with energy, pulsing with life. He felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Not only had he survived challenges that seemed impossible, but he had also succeeded through intelligence, patience, and careful observation. Humans were fragile, yes, but their minds were powerful tools. He had proven it today. Liara allowed herself a small smile. Ilya's reign had not only survived the impossible, he had done so with elegance, thoughtfulness, and resilience. She knew that his journey was far from over, but she was eager to continue watching. Humans, she realized, were beings worthy of respect, not for strength, but for the extraordinary capabilities of their minds and spirits. As night fell, Ilias set up camp on a secure ledge. The canyon's walls shimmered in the soft glow of the rare plants, and he carefully stored his samples. Exhausted but triumphant, he lay on the ground, gazing at the stars emerging over Zarathia's horizon. He reflected on the day's achievements, feeling a profound sense of connection to the planet and to the journey he had undertaken. Liara remained unseen, her eyes following his movements as he rested. She felt a growing admiration for this fragile yet extraordinary being. Ilya's reign was remarkable, not for his strength, but for his mind, his patience, and his courage. She knew that humanity, despite its physical limitations, possessed a spark that set them apart from every other species she had encountered. As Ilias drifted into a deep, well-earned sleep, he was unaware of the silent observer above. Liara made a quiet promise to herself. She would continue to watch, to learn, and to understand the extraordinary nature of humans. Ilia's journey was far from over, but today he had proven one undeniable truth. Human ingenuity, resilience, and courage could survive the impossible. The first rays of sunlight touched the canyon walls, making the crystalline formations glimmer like a million tiny stars. Captain Ilya's reign awoke with a quiet determination. Yesterday's journey had been the most challenging he had faced yet, but he had survived, and today, he knew, he would reach the heart of the canyon where the rarest and most powerful plants grew. He packed his collected samples carefully, checking each one for stability. The fragile plants had survived the night, and their faint pulsating glow reassured him that they were in perfect condition. Ilias adjusted his pack and looked around the canyon. The terrain was narrower and more complex ahead, but he felt ready. His experiences thus far had taught him that patience and observation were just as important as courage. From a hidden perch above, Liara watched silently. The alien princess had followed Ilias for days, intrigued by his resilience and ingenuity. She had never seen a human survive such extreme conditions with such composure. To her, he represented the very best of humanity, clever, adaptable, and unafraid to face challenges that others would flee. Today, she felt a mix of excitement and admiration. The final stretch of his journey would reveal not just his physical capabilities, but the depth of his mind and spirit. Ilias began his descent into the deeper canyon, moving carefully along narrow paths lined with crystalline outcroppings. He paused frequently to examine small clusters of plants, noting the differences in their growth patterns, light absorption, and energy output. Each discovery fueled his determination, and he documented every detail meticulously. The canyon walls seemed to close in as he progressed, the corridors becoming tighter and more intricate. The glowing plants illuminated the path, casting dancing patterns of light across the crystals. Ilias moved with heightened awareness, testing each step and balancing carefully on uneven surfaces. He knew that one wrong move could be disastrous, but he also knew that careful planning and observation could overcome any obstacle. Liara observed with fascination. Ilia's movements were deliberate, precise, and full of purpose. He did not rush. He did not panic. Instead, he relied on observation, creativity, and patience to navigate challenges that would have overwhelmed many other explorers. She realized once again why humans were so remarkable. Their strength lay not in physical power, but in their ability to think, adapt, and persevere against impossible odds. As he rounded a bend, Elias encountered a natural barrier, a series of towering crystal columns blocking the narrow path. The only way forward was to maneuver through the gaps between them, which were uneven and unstable. He studied the formation carefully, noting the safest points to step and where the crystals were most solid. Then, step by step, he began weaving through the columns, using his staff to test stability and maintain balance. A small crystal shifted under his weight, but Elias adjusted instantly, redistributing his balance and moving forward without hesitation. His movements were precise and controlled, guided by both instinct and careful calculation. From her hidden perch, Liara felt a growing sense of admiration. Humans, she realized, could achieve extraordinary feats not through force, but through intelligence and thoughtful action. Elias embodied that truth completely. Finally, he reached a small plateau, and before him lay the heart of the canyon, a breathtaking grove of rare plants bathed in soft, radiant light. The plants were larger and more vibrant than any he had seen so far, their translucent leaves pulsing with energy. Elias felt a surge of awe and excitement. He knelt carefully, examining their structure and taking precise samples for study. The grove was alive with energy, and Elias marveled at its beauty. He noted the patterns of light, the way the plants responded to his touch, and the subtle differences in their growth. Every detail was valuable for understanding how these plants could provide sustainable energy for humanity. He worked methodically, taking care to avoid damaging the delicate specimens. Liara observed silently, mesmerized. She had never seen a human approach such a delicate task with both care and focus. Elias was not only surviving in this harsh environment, he was thriving, studying it, and learning from it. She realized that this combination of resilience, intelligence, and respect for life made humans extraordinary, far beyond what her people had expected. Hours passed as Elias documented and collected samples. The canyon's light shifted with the sun, casting different patterns on the crystalline walls. He adjusted his approach, moving carefully to reach the most productive plants. Each movement was deliberate, balancing caution with efficiency. By the time he had finished, his collection was complete, and he had recorded every detail meticulously. As he prepared to return to base camp, Elias noticed a soft movement in the distance. At first, he thought it was a reflection from the crystals, but then he realized it was something more. A figure stood on a ridge above the canyon, a tall, graceful presence observing him. Elias froze for a moment, heart racing. The being was unlike anything he had ever seen. Liara stepped forward slightly, revealing herself fully. Her skin shimmered faintly in the sunlight, her long hair flowing gently in the breeze. She regarded Elias with calm curiosity, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fascination and admiration. Elias, though startled, sensed no threat. Her presence was serene, almost comforting, and he instinctively knew that she meant no harm. He straightened, keeping his movements slow and respectful. "Hello," he said cautiously. I didn't expect to see anyone here." Liara tilted her head slightly, a small smile appearing on her face. "I have been watching you," she said softly, her voice melodic and gentle. "You have survived challenges that would have defeated most beings. You move with care, intelligence, and courage. I am impressed." Elias blinked, processing her words. "You've been watching me?" he asked. "All this time?" "Yes," Liara replied. "I wanted to see how humans handle adversity. You are remarkable, fragile yet capable of surviving the impossible through thought and careful action." Elias felt a mix of awe and curiosity. He had read about alien species, but he had never imagined encountering one like her. "I didn't know anyone was here," he said. "I thought I was alone." Liara's expression softened. "You are brave and careful. You respect this land and its life. That is rare." She paused, observing the samples he had collected. "These plants, you handle them with care, even though they could have been lost in your exploration. That is human ingenuity at work." Elias nodded. "I learned that surviving here isn't just about strength. It's about thinking, observing, and adapting. Every step matters." Liara smiled, a gesture of genuine admiration. "Yes, that is why I wanted to watch. Humans, you are extraordinary. Fragile yet capable of remarkable feats." She stepped closer, her presence calm and non-threatening. "I have seen many species in this galaxy. You are different. You survive through intelligence, patience, and care. You thrive where others fail. Elias felt a sense of connection not just to her but to the planet itself. I've learned a lot here, he said. Not just about the plants, but about patience, observation, and resilience. Every challenge teaches something new, Liara nodded. That is why I admire you. Not because you are strong or fast, but because you understand the value of thought, care, and courage. You are an example of what your species can achieve. They stood in silence for a few moments, the canyon around them glowing softly with the light of the rare plants. Elias felt a profound sense of achievement. He had faced impossible challenges, navigated treacherous terrain, and completed his mission. And now he had encountered an intelligent being who recognized his efforts, not for his strength, but for his mind and spirit. Elias spoke quietly. I never expected to be admired for surviving, but I suppose it makes sense. Survival is more than just getting through the day. It's about learning, adapting, and respecting the world around you. Liara nodded. Exactly, and you have done all that. You have proven that humans, though fragile, possess qualities that can surpass many stronger species. You have survived the impossible, and done so with grace, intelligence, and care. The canyon seemed to shimmer around them, as if acknowledging Elia's achievement. He felt a deep sense of pride, not in power or skill, but in the fact that his thoughtfulness and perseverance had allowed him to succeed. He had completed a mission that many would have deemed impossible, relying only on his mind, patience, and respect for the environment. Liara took a step closer. I would like to learn from you, she said softly, to understand more about humans and your ways. You have shown that survival is not just about strength, but about intelligence, observation, and courage. That is why I am here. Elias smiled. Then I would be happy to share. I've learned a lot from this planet already, and perhaps we can learn from each other. They spent the remainder of the day exchanging knowledge. Elias described the plants, his observations, and his methods of navigating the canyon. Liara shared insights about her people, their understanding of energy, and their perspective on life across the galaxy. It was a meeting of minds, a bridge between species built on respect, curiosity, and mutual admiration. As the sun began to set, Elias prepared to return to base camp with his samples. Liara watched him carefully pack everything, ensuring the fragile specimens were secure. You have done something remarkable here, she said. Not because of strength, but because of your mind and spirit. Humanity is capable of extraordinary things. Elias nodded, feeling the weight and pride of his accomplishment. I've learned that challenges teach more than victories ever could. Every difficulty, every moment of uncertainty can reveal something about who we are and what we can do. Liara smiled once more. I will carry this lesson with me, and I will remember you, Elias' reign, as an example of human potential. As night fell over the canyon, Elias began his journey back to base camp, guided by the soft light of the crystalline walls. He moved with the same care and attention that had carried him through the impossible, but now he did so with a sense of achievement, knowledge, and connection that he had never experienced before. Liara remained on her ridge, watching until he disappeared into the shadows of the canyon. She had witnessed something extraordinary, a human thriving against impossible odds, surviving not through strength, but through intelligence, patience, and courage. Elia's reign had proven that humans were capable of greatness, and she knew that his story would resonate across worlds, inspiring respect and admiration wherever it was told. Elias reached base camp as the stars emerged overhead. He was exhausted, but his heart was light. He had survived the impossible, discovered invaluable knowledge, and formed a bridge of understanding with a being from another world. Humanity's potential, he realized, was not in dominance, but in thought, creativity, and resilience. And somewhere above the canyon, Liara smiled, silently cheering the fragile human who had conquered the impossible, knowing that he, and by extension humanity, was something extraordinary. He survived the impossible, with only the alien princess watching,